Hey, everyone. Hello. Thanks for joining us. I'm Christine Norander, one of the partners here at Sembrar. I'm joining everyone here from Seattle, Washington. We are super excited to have James Lloyd joining us today. Brandon Gardner will be our host as always. But again, just really, really pleased that James is going to be joining us. We will have a chat that's live during the event. Please feel free to add questions throughout the event. We were going to leave some time for answering those and responding to those at the end of the event. In the meantime, if you get a chance, maybe introduce yourself and share where you're calling from. It's always fun to see kind of across the US where people are joining us from. We're going to be starting here in just 1 to 2 minutes. So again, share that info in the chat, share questions during the chat, and get ready for just a really amazing conversation with Brandon and James.
All right, welcome everyone, and a special welcome to our guest, James Lloyd. Thank you for joining us today. And of course, our audience from around the world who is joining us today for this conversation with James. I'd like to introduce myself. I am Brandon Gardner. I am the founder and chief product manager at Sembrar. We are a fractional product management agency. Product leaders come to us when they need that flexible capacity, bringing in very senior product managers to come in and help with those side projects that seem to always come up, brand new projects from 0 to 1, or someone who's going on leave for an extended period of time. We are that choice for many product leaders who come to us for that. So welcome, and thank you for joining us today. And we want to do a quick introduction to James here. Oh, and also can't forget, thank you, Christine, who has done so much work on the backside of this to make this work so well, so flawlessly. So thank you to Christine, who is my great partner here at Sembrar. Thank you, Christine. And James, let's do a quick introduction to you, who you are. As your title says on the slide, you are the co-founder of Redox and chief beer brewer. So we have to hear that as well in that story. Maybe you can give us a quick introduction to who you are. But James, before you go into that, for the audience to know, my first interaction with James was actually in an interview, and James was interviewing me for a role at Redox. And I was actually interviewing at many different companies at the time. And I was so blown away by James and his sincerity, his intelligence, that it was an easy choice when I did get the offer to join with Redox. So James, thank you, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words there, Brandon. And I guess now it's time to have a little role reversal, and now you get to interview me, I guess. Yeah, so
that's exactly right. Role reversals. Love doing that.
Yeah. So my name is James. I'm calling in from Fort Collins, Colorado, and yeah, as Brandon mentioned, I've been doing healthcare technology related work basically my entire career. I started off at a large electronic health record company called Epic. Worked there from 2008 to 2013, and then around leaving then got involved with some entrepreneurial activities, and that which led me to then join up with a few other folks to start Redox, which is in the healthcare data space. So we offer an API to allow digital health companies, health systems, insurance companies, and anybody who's joining in the healthcare ecosystem to exchange data securely and easily and in a highly normalized fashion. So, so was the CTO and co-founder there for the past 10 years, and Yeah, so I'm excited to. I'm sure there'll be plenty of time to dig into more of the history and work that we did there. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And how about your title as a beer brewer?
Yeah, along with my partner, we own a small brewery here in Fort Collins. So occasionally I brew beer. More often than not, I'm just doing anything that involves a spreadsheet that's behind the scenes that nobody else wants to do. But yeah.
Oh, well, good. Well, you'll maybe have to give us a little bit more into that. So, James, I know we chatted here before and really wanted to bring you on because of your incredible experience. You were the first one, you built the product at Redox. You were the first one to build that product. You were the CTO and very successful product and used by, I mean, can we say at least hundreds of thousands, millions of billions of records that are exchanged on a daily, monthly basis, which is pretty impressive. So it really grew from, an idea to something that is much larger, that is critical to our healthcare system. And so really wanted to talk about that journey, particularly from the product side of it and the evolution of that. So let's start out with this question is you first had this idea. Every entrepreneur has this idea and then it evolves. Tell me about the problem you started to solve and then how you eventually got to the problem that really got Redox off the ground and going.
Yeah, I think it's actually probably more interesting to start even before the problem we were originally solving.
Sure.
So after leaving Epic, me and one of the other Redox co-founders, Nico, he and I helped start a co-working space in Madison, Wisconsin, where we were living at the time. And in that co-working space, we had a lot of people coming in who had a ton of healthcare experience, and they were. It was a very entrepreneurial place. A lot of people were starting new companies, bouncing a bunch of ideas around, but we didn't see a ton of people leveraging that experience to start new companies in healthcare, even though they were coming in with all that background. And so we thought, hey, it would be interesting and good for the space and good for the city to help these folks leverage that experience to start new companies in healthcare. At that time, Luke joined us. He was the third Redox co-founder to run this incubator, and we actually ran a health tech incubator for about a year, and we never really figured out how to pay ourselves to do that. So as we slowly ran through our savings and had to figure out how to pay rent and everything, we were like, okay, we gotta figure this out. And we had started about 10 companies or so, or helped other people start 10 companies in that incubator. And as we were helping them get started, we were doing a lot of things behind the scenes for them. One of those things was building a little bit of an integration platform that these health tech companies could use to, seamlessly connect to the systems that they were trying to sell to. And as we were thinking what comes next for us as we're trying to figure out how to pay rent, we're like, we should really just start. We could join one of the companies we're helping start, or we could just start our own company. And so we were bouncing a bunch of ideas around, and ultimately we started Redox because we had already kind of found a bit of product market fit just by scratching our own itch by building tools for the companies we were working with in the incubator. So, the initial problem that we set out to solve was helping the engineering and product teams at digital health companies be able to exchange data with any health system in a single kind of normalized fashion, and do it in a way that was super intuitive so that you didn't have to have a ton of healthcare background, because we were basically planning on recent graduates being the first engineering hire and really planning on that as kind of our target user base. So yeah, that's kind of how we got started.
Yeah. It's such an interesting, fascinating story of moving from, well, let's start this co-working space, and we're helping all these digital health companies, or just companies in general. But then how can we help digital health companies to, well, can we supply the backbone? And the backbone is really the data. We're seeing that very much today with the evolution of AI, and being really that backbone for what Redox was. And so that really got you then going, and finally you could start eating again after a while. Classic story. So what was it like? Let's take it now from this part where, okay, you have now this idea and you landed your first client. So someone was willing to pay you. to actually build this backbone or this data pipeline. So what was the first year of building your tool? What was it like really building that tool in that first year? How did it evolve? What did you learn during that evolution of that first year, which was probably pretty critical for you?
Yeah. So I would say the first thing we learned was just by developing some empathy and really being at the elbows of our customers. So our customers were digital health tech startups, at least to begin with, and so we actually joined several accelerators just to be kind of a captive audience with who we thought our customers could be, and we learned a ton about the challenges that they were going through from a sales standpoint, and really started to tailor a lot of our early tools to help with their sales process. We knew that our product could help them once they were live with their customers and sharing patient data with these health systems. But the sales cycle in healthcare is very long. And so we actually found ourselves where we had interested customers, but our direct customers didn't have their health system customers yet. And so we actually needed to move our product a little bit forward in their overall life cycle so that we could help them actually close that deal. And so being able to help them provide a more in-depth demo of their product using real healthcare data was actually one of the first unlocks to help that whole process move faster, and for us to actually get paying customers sooner and really add value before they actually order live in a production setting. So that was one of the first kind of unlocks for us. One of the big kind of other areas of learning was just figuring out who we wanted our customers to be. There was an option early on the table of us, rather than selling to digital health companies, selling to health systems. And it took some trial and error and some hard conversations around figuring out which direction to go to first. And ultimately it came down to sales cycle and product market fit being there for the digital health companies, and it just being much more challenging to sell to health systems. So now fast forward, about 8 years or so after we started the company, now we're actually selling to health systems a little bit more now. But when we first started, it was we definitely hit our head against the wall a few times with that, trying to figure that out. And then from like a team building standpoint, in the first year, we grew the team largely from within our own network to start. So one of the things we realized after getting to about 10, 15, 20 people in the company time frame was that the company was starting to look a little homogenous from a background standpoint. So a lot of folks we'd worked with at Epic previously, and folks who would come out of like the health tech ecosystem, and folks who were from Madison, Wisconsin, where we were from at the time. And so we learned that we needed to be pretty intentional about augmenting the skill sets, the backgrounds that were on the team. And so we went through a pretty intentional period of growth where we were trying not to hire people who had the same background, and that was very useful for us. We kind of set out, one of our company values for a long time was to challenge the status quo, and that was proving to be hard to do if we were hiring it from all people who helped create the status quo. So it turns out doing a lot of data transactions, for example, hiring people from the financial world where they're doing billions and trillions of transactions a day was super helpful from an engineering standpoint, for example. And so that's those are some of the things I learned. And I guess for me personally, as the CTO and kind of leader of the product and engineering organizations, over that shift from being kind of an initial individual contributor to helping run the team and helping make sure everything was planned out well, it was just a massive shift of my own work from writing code, creating designs, to more communication, strategy, vision setting, things like that. So definitely learned kind of sometimes the hard way on where I needed to orient towards from a communication standpoint.
Yeah. So what I think I heard out of that, or some of the principles that you learned, particularly in that first year, was build empathy, fast empathy for your clients, and what they needed. And in the story you said, it was you are working with these clients and you realized, well, we have to help them win their deals.
Mm-hmm.
And so how could you go further upstream and helping them win that deal and really being a part of that, which, it seems it seems like a great approach, because if you can get in at the first, well, then you're obviously going to win the business later on and for the long term as well. So building that empathy, it sounded like it was a critical aspect.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other part is, as you started building, maybe you can give us a little bit more details on that first year. Was it you and you went out? I'm assuming you'd raised funds by this point, but was it just you and a few other developers? Like, who was it in the first year?
Yeah. We had, I guess I'm not quite sure how much we had grown over the first year versus maybe the first few years, but a lot of our kind of initial team were, we had a few folks on kind of the sales, marketing, business development side, but then a lot of, we had probably 8 or 9 engineers, mostly with health tech backgrounds, largely folks that I'd worked with in the past. And so kind of the first, I guess, chapter of the company was, basically we were one engineering squad, somewhere 5 to 8 people, largely being highly iterative,
Mm-hmm.
A single person owning, at the beginning, basically creating a whole module or a whole feature on their own. And then kind of fast forwarding into the second chapter, we kind of, from that early engineering team, then really pulled out kind of 3 areas of management or leadership within that kind of broader product and engineering team.
Mm-hmm.
So we pulled out our first product management person. We had our first kind of people manager, and then we wanted to be fairly intentional about separating that from our first like technical manager or kind of lead engineer. And so those kind of 3 leadership positions emerged from that broader team as we started to scale into more of like the 12, 15 type number of the product and engineering team.
Yeah. I just read an article. It was pretty interesting. It was Lenny's newsletter, and he had done some survey at some of the largest big companies, and when they hired their first product managers and when they came in. So, and they were all over, but some was very beginning, they hired their first product manager, and some it was like 8 years after they had started, they hired their first PM. It sounds like you were about, what, year and a half, 2 years, but it was an engineer that you brought in to do more of the product management.
Yeah. And it was more of a lateral move / promotion from within the engineering team. So we had somebody who was very naturally disposed to doing demos, joining customer calls, being very connected with the business side. And it was clear that he had an interest in all of those aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And with Redux being a very technical product, it made sense to have a person with an engineering background.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of how it was. Probably about 2-ish years in, maybe a little bit more, where that person made that shift. And to be honest, we were all, we got it was a little bit of a cheat code to be building tools for developers, because as developers ourselves, we could all play a little bit of a product management role. Like we could all at least empathize a little bit with the user as kind of being from that demographic. So I think that probably pushed out our need for having our first full-time product manager a little bit further out than if we had been making tools for a marketing department or something like that. We probably would have needed that product manager a little bit sooner.
Right. We're a few years separated from that first year at this point, but what would you say are maybe 1 or 2 things you can think of now that you would say, I would do it differently at this point? Like, what can you tell our audience, particularly if they're building a product now? What might you have done differently in that first year or 2?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I think one of the things I learned was getting the timing, getting the kind of like horizon right, and when you're thinking about iterating on your product, building V2 or V3 or whatever's next. We went through phases of thinking 5 or 10 years out, which was too long. Then we also took on projects that we were really only thinking 3 months out, and that was too short. And so one of the things that I would say I kind of learned is as you're iterating on your product, like I've now kind of come around to thinking about 2 years out. That's going to be the life cycle of whatever it is you're building now, and you're probably going to learn enough over the next 2 years to want to redo it again. But if you plan more than that out, you're going to end up over engineering. You're going to get kind of speculative about what you think the future holds. So that was, I think, was a big learning through the period. Yeah.
2 years, the magic number for you. 2 years. 2 years out, not too far, not too short. 2 years.
Yeah.
I see a question here, Andrew Branch. Andrew, thanks for joining us. Good to see you. We'll get to your question, so stick around and we'll make sure we get to this question. I want to ask James another question here before we get to that, which I think is an excellent question. James, eventually, over your 10 years of working at Redox, you brought on a full product team, designers. Like, when did you realize you really, you needed that product help? What was the key to you, and how did you come to that realization? And I understand that this might be a hard question to ask. So
yeah. So in general, I sort of thought about my role through the whole period of the company is trying to fill gaps that exist within the team or the organization for long enough to learn how that role works and learn what good looks like, so that I could hire somebody who was better than me at that job. And some gaps were super obvious. There was a period where I was doing a lot of the interviewing and serving a bit in an HR function, and that was a very obvious gap for the company that we needed to fill with someone else other than me. And there was a period where I was also our first designer, and that was also pretty obvious that I wasn't a professional at that. And so it really came down to where the pain points were from customer satisfaction, sales standpoint, and just trying to figure out, which at any point there's going to be hundreds of gaps, and just doing the kind of constant prioritization of those and seeing which ones can get filled first. We, as a rule, tried to, from a people standpoint, people management standpoint, and team growth standpoint, we were always really intentional about having managers only have 8 or fewer direct reports. And so that was a pretty constant kind of criteria or limit for us on just knowing we needed to hire and trying to stay in front of that. But yeah, other things were really driven by how painful it was for the company in one way or another.
Yeah. Good advice. Go into it long enough to know what good looks like, and that you're maybe not cut out to do that job, and then go find someone else to do it. That's actually great advice for me personally as building